Late August tells the truth, if you know where to look.
Come stand here with me a minute. It's the last week of August. This bed grew tomatoes all summer and did a fine job of it, but the leaves have gone yellow and papery from the bottom up. There's maybe half an inch of mulch left. I put down 3 inches back in June. The top of the ground has gone hard and smooth, like somebody dragged a trowel across it. And those weeds by the fence post? Look close. They've already made seed. Most folks standing where you're standing would walk to the shed and come back with a bag of 10-10-10. I know, because for about 20 years, that's exactly what I did. So here's something that sounds backward, and then I'll spend the next half hour showing you why it isn't. That bag of fertilizer might be the 4th thing this ground needs, not the 1st. Summer doesn't only pull nutrients out of a garden, it pulls the cover off of it. It bakes the moisture out of the top few inches. It collapses the little air spaces that let rain soak in instead of running sideways. And it burns through the organic material you worked in last spring. Fertilizer fixes a shortage of nutrients. That's a real job, and it matters. But it does not fix a crust. It doesn't fix a hard pan under a footpath. It doesn't put organic matter back. And it can't put a living root in the ground. If the cover's gone and the water runs off instead of in, hauling more groceries into that kitchen won't help much because the roof's off the building. Cover, moisture, structure, and the life that builds it. Those come first. The bag comes after, if the soil actually asks for it. And in a minute, I'll show you how to make it answer. Before I go further, let me be square.
Good advice should show its roots before telling you what to do.
About where this comes from, because there's a lot of nonsense sold under the word Appalachian. There was never a 20-step mountain checklist. Nobody handed one down. If somebody tells you their great-grandmother kept one tacked inside the smokehouse door, they're selling something. What survives in the record is a way of thinking. The Park Service's own history of farming in the Great Smokies describes families hauling manure out of the barn to the garden, plowing under old plant material, letting winter freezes and thaws help break the ground up, and spending a staggering amount of hand labor keeping weeds down. Feed the ground with what the place already made. Work with the season instead of shoving against it. Waste almost nothing. That's the logic. What follows is that logic put back together and checked against what the Extension Services and the USDA have actually measured. Where the old way holds up, I'll say so. Where copying it literally will get you in trouble, I'll say that too. And there's one place it absolutely will. That one's number 14. Hold on to it. Let's start with what the garden is losing, because there's no sense filling a bucket that's still leaking. First thing, quit treating the whole garden as one piece of soil.
First pass isn't about fixing anything. It's about seeing the pattern.
Most of us amend by area. So many pounds per 100 square feet, spread even, like frosting a cake. But soil doesn't fail evenly. It fails in patches, so walk it. Give it 5 minutes and find 5 spots. Where does water stand after a rain? Where does it run off and leave a fan of silt? Where's the ground crusted hard? Where has the mulch vanished? And where do you walk every day without once thinking about it? I use 5 sticks off the wood pile, pushed in at the trouble spots. Costs nothing. But now you're looking at 5 specific problems instead of one vague feeling that the garden's wore out. Tired garden almost never has the same problem everywhere. Second, stop next spring's weeds before they turn into seed. Most people pull weeds.
Once you see the trouble, stop creating more work for next spring.
In August because the garden looks untidy. That's fine, but it's not the reason that matters. A weed that makes seed in late August is borrowing labor from you next April. Penn State's weed people put it plainly. Preventing seed production is what drives down the seed bank in the soil, and that seed bank is what you'll be fighting with a hoe next year. Pigweed can be making mature seed by mid-August. Lamb's quarters and ragweed generally don't finish until September, which means right now you're standing in the last easy chance of the year. Hold one up and look at the seed head. That's not one weed anymore. That's next year's problem, getting organized. If you do nothing else this week, walk the rows and take the heads off anything flowering. You don't have to dig them out, just don't let them finish. Third, Learn the difference between a dead plant and a diseased plant. Two pieces of advice out there
What leaves the bed matters just as much as what stays behind.
seem to contradict each other. One says strip the vegetable garden bare in fall, because disease and insects overwinter on old plant material. Iowa State says that, most of Extension says that, and they're right. The other says leave your residue because it feeds the soil. Also right. Here's how I settle it. Sort as you go. Healthy residue is material. Chopped bean vines, clean squash leaves, corn stalks that never had a problem, that stays and does work. Anything that carried disease this summer, or was crawling with something, goes out. Blighted tomato foliage, mildewed vines, squash bugs and their eggs. That's sanitation, and sanitation isn't optional. The old-timers wasted very little, and that's worth copying. But recycling trouble back into the same bed isn't thrift. It's false economy with extra steps. Fourth, stop yanking every healthy root out of the ground. This is the one that took me longest to come around on. When a healthy annual is finished,
Clean doesn't always mean healthy. Sometimes the best cleanup stays underground.
you don't have to pull the whole thing and shake half a shovelful of soil off the roots. Cut it at the ground and let the roots stay and rot in place. Think about what a root actually is. It's organic matter you already bought and paid for with sunlight, already down there in the exact place you'd want it, in a shape no shovel could reproduce. And when it breaks down, it leaves channels behind that water and air travel through. The USDA's soil health people organize everything around 4 ideas. Keep the soil covered. Disturb it as little as you can. Keep living roots in the ground as much of the year as you can, and grow a mix of things. Pulling every root out for tidiness works against 3 of those 4 at once. Now the caveat, and it's real. If the plant was diseased, or you've got root knot nematodes, out it comes. Tidiness isn't a reason. Disease is. Fifth, don't fertilize because the calendar said so. I promised you a way to make the soil answer the question. Here it is. Kentucky's Extension Service, writing about planting.
Now ask the harder question. Does this soil need feeding at all?
Fall vegetables in late August and September says something you almost never hear from anybody selling anything. If the crop that just came out was well fertilized and grew vigorously, you may not need to add much additional fertilizer, if any. The people whose job it is to know are telling you the honest answer is sometimes nothing. Now, this is where somebody decides I said fertilizer is bad. I didn't. If a soil test comes back low, fertilizer is the right tool and you should use it. What I'm against is the automatic bag, feeding a date on the calendar instead of a deficiency in the dirt. Late summer is the best time to find out which one you've got. Virginia Tech recommends sampling as the garden season winds down, because it leaves time for corrections before spring. That matters most for lime, which moves slow. Illinois Extension notes it can take a year or more to shift TFF, so sample now. Dig down about 6 inches, take 10 or so scoops from around the garden, mix them in a clean bucket, and send a cup to your state lab through your county extension office. Most charge less than a bag of fertilizer. Feed a deficiency. Don't feed a date. That's 5. Now let's put hands on the ground itself. 6th, a crust and a compaction layer are not the same animal. This is where a lot of good gardeners lose an afternoon.
Chemistry is only half the story. The next problem is physical.
The surface feels hard, so out comes the tiller, and the whole bed gets churned 8 inches deep to fix a problem living in the top ½ inch. A crust forms when bare soil takes raindrops straight on the chin. Rain hits exposed ground, blows the aggregates apart, and the fine particles settle into the pores and seal the top like a lid. Water that used to soak in now runs off. Compaction is different. That's pore space squeezed out by weight, and it can sit 6 inches down or deeper. Different problems, different depths, different fixes. So check before you dig. Scratch the surface with a finger. Break through a thin, hard layer into crumbly soil underneath. That's crust. Stays dense as you go down? That's something else. Don't bring an 8-inch solution to a 1-inch problem. 7th, if it's crust, break the crust and leave the rest alone. Wait until the soil has some moisture in it. Working soil when it's too wet wrecks the structure you're trying to save, and clay punishes you hardest for it. Then scratch the surface open, an inch or so, with a rake or a fork. Then cover it back up so it doesn't seal the next time it rains. You're opening a door for water and air. You're not renovating the basement. Eighth, prove you've got compaction before you go trying to cure it. Here's a test that costs nothing. Take a garden fork or a length of rebar and push it straight down in 3.
If a shallow fix works, don't go hunting for a deeper cure.
Places, the middle of a bed where nothing walks, right where you always step to reach the tomatoes, and the middle of your main path. Feel the difference in your hands. That's your compaction map, and you didn't buy a thing. Why does it matter? Because the cure for real compaction is expensive and the results aren't guaranteed. University of Minnesota's soil people are blunt about deep tillage and subsoiling. It can shatter a hard layer, but it hasn't been shown to reliably pay off, and results are variable and hard to predict. In garden terms, dig deep, then walk the same path across it, and you've bought one season and a sore back. Ninth, fix where your feet go. This is the least exciting thing on the list, and it might be the most valuable. Decide once, this month, where the growing zones are and where the walking zones are. Beds you never step on, paths you always step on. Mark them if you need to. Compaction in a home garden isn't coming from a combine. It's coming from you, one boot at a time, in the same places, for years. One of the cheapest soil amendments in America is a path you actually stay on. And if you're my age, there's a second benefit that's got nothing to do with soil. Permanent beds mean less tilling, less bending, less hauling. The garden gets easier the same year the soil does. 10th, put water in the ground before you put mulch on top of it. Here's a mistake I made for years with total confidence. The ground looks dry, so I'd spread.
Next comes an order of operations mistake almost everybody makes once.
Mulch, and then feel like I'd fixed something. I hadn't. Mulch is a lid. Extension guidance on water-wise landscaping is consistent. Put mulch down on soil that's weed-free and moist. Spread 3 inches of straw over bone-dry ground, and you've carefully sealed in the dryness. Mulch saves moisture. It cannot manufacture moisture, so water first. Let it soak. Then mulch. 11th. Stop watering by the clock and start checking the depth. 20 minutes with a hose means nothing on its own. It depends on your pressure, your soil, and how dry things were when you started. Sandy ground drinks it straight down. Tight clay sheds, half of it off the top. So do this instead. Water. Wait for it to move. Then cut a small slit in an out-of-the-way corner with a trowel and see how far the wet went. The standard most extension offices give is a soaking that wets the soil 6 to 8 inches down, rather than watering light and often. Kentucky says the same for fall gardens. Do that check twice and you'll know your garden's number forever. And I'd bet you $1 you've been watering less than you thought. The clock measures your hose. The soil tells you whether the watering actually worked. 12th. Before you add mulch, look underneath the mulch. Don't dump 3 fresh inches on top of whatever's there. Pull the old layer back in a couple of spots and ask 3.
Depth tells you what happened below. Mulch tells you what happened above.
Questions. Is the soil under it moist or dry as a cracker? Is the mulch actually gone, or has it just slid off to one side? And where are the bare patches? Mulch disappearing isn't always failure. Organic mulches are supposed to break down. They shade the ground and hold water while they're up there, then turn into organic matter on the way out. A mulch that vanished did its job and paid you twice. But it has to be replaced, because the moment that ground goes bare, you're back to crusting, evaporation, and hard surface temperatures. One quick word about your wallet, then I'll leave it alone. Late August is when the garden centers put everything on the end cap. So let me tell you what not to buy yet. Don't buy lime until a soil test says how much, because lime you don't need is money gone and hard to take back out. Don't buy fertilizer until that same test comes back. Don't buy a tiller for a problem you haven't confirmed with a garden fork. If there's a fix for tired ground, it's leaves, compost, roots, mulch, and time, and 4 of the 5 are free. All right. Cover and structure are handled. Now let's put carbon back. 13th, put compost where it can actually do something. Compost is not seasoning. You don't sprinkle it everywhere and call it done. In an established bed that's
This is where restraint matters more than spreading a little everywhere.
already got structure and living roots, spread it on the surface and let the worms and rain carry it down. That layer does double duty as cover. In a bed you're rebuilding from scratch, working compost into the root zone makes more sense. The difference is disturbance. In a bed that's working, digging costs more than the mixing gains you. And if you're short on compost, put it where it'll pay. 2 beds done properly beat 6 beds dusted. 14th. Here's the one I told you to hold on to. The Park Service's history of farming in the Smokies describes those families hauling manure from the barn out to the garden. That's documented, and it's the best example.
Now comes an old practice worth keeping only with a modern safety rule.
Of the old logic there is. The farm made fertility, so the farm used it. But look at when they did it. Winter and early spring, part of the routine of the cold months, along with pruning fruit trees and clearing new ground. Here's what makes that interesting. The USDA's organic rules today say raw animal manure has to be composted, or else worked into the soil at least 120 days before you harvest a crop whose edible part touches the soil, and at least 90 days before harvest for crops whose edible part doesn't. Count backward from a July tomato. Count backward from a June head of lettuce. You land in winter, almost exactly where those mountain families were already putting it. They weren't working from a food safety standard. They were working from when the sled could get there. But the old timing and the modern rule point at the same window, and that's about as good a case for old practice as you'll ever get. The trouble comes when somebody hears the old timers used manure and spreads fresh manure in late August on a bed they'll be picking spinach out of in October. That's not tradition. That's a 120-day rule broken by about 90 days, on exactly the crop the rule was written for. Properly composted manure is handled differently, and it's the safer route for most home gardens. If you're using raw, it goes on in the off-season, ahead of a long gap, and it gets worked in, not left sitting on top. Learn the principle from the old farmers. Recycle your fertility. Just don't inherit the sanitation standards of 1890 along with it. 15th. Turn clean crop residue into armor instead of hauling it off. You don't owe anybody a garden that looks like a parking lot in September. Clean chopped tops, fallen leaves, straw, spent healthy vines.
Strip away the unsafe part, and the habit of wasting, nothing still holds.
All of it can lie on the ground and work for you. USDA's soil health guidance is direct about what surface residue does. It buffers the ground against raindrop impact and wind, evens out temperature swings, and cuts evaporation. That's 3 jobs from material you were about to set out in a bag by the road. Chop it some so it lies flat and doesn't blow. Keep the disease stuff out, same rule as before, and leave it be. A garden doesn't have to look bare to look finished. Now for the part the old mountain farms understood in their bones, even if nobody said it this way. Ground wants something growing in it. 16th. Plant a cover crop for a job. Not because cover crops are good. This is where most advice goes soft and lists species at you. Let's not. Start with the problem, then pick the plant. If the job is...
Bare soil is an empty shift. Living roots keep the crew working.
Holding bare ground through winter and catching leftover nutrients before rain carries them off, that's a cereal grain. Rye, wheat, barley, fibrous roots, tough as boots, and they scavenge what's left in the soil. If the job is putting nitrogen back, that's a legume. Crimson clover, hairy vetch, winter peas. They partner with bacteria on their roots to pull nitrogen out of the air, and when they break down, it goes to the next crop. If the job is opening tight ground, that's a deep-rooted type, and radish is what most people reach for. West Virginia University's extension puts it about as plainly as it can be put. Choose cover crops for a purpose. 17th. Don't buy a 12-species mix just because the bag says regenerative. I know that's contrary, but somebody ought to say it. Diversity in the soil is a real principle. It's one of the four the USDA builds everything around. But it's a principle about the system you're managing, not a scoring contest on a seed label. In a home garden bed, one species matched to your actual problem and sown at the right time will beat 8 species sown late by somebody who wasn't sure what any of them were for. Diversity is useful. Random diversity is an expensive seed bag. 18th. Use the window before it closes on you. Cover crop timing is the one thing in this whole video I can't give you a date for, and I'll be honest about why. It depends on your first frost, and that depends on your elevation.
Right seed is only half the decision. Timing can still ruin it.
Your county, and which side of the ridge you're on. Anybody handing you one nationwide date is guessing. What I can give you is the shape of it. University of Maryland's extension describes the fall sowing window as roughly 2 months, starting around mid-August and closing by mid-October, because the plants need time to germinate and grow before hard frost and short days shut them down. Legumes like crimson clover and hairy vetch want the earlier end. Cereal rye takes later, planting better than almost anything. Your frost date outranks my calendar. Call your county extension office. 10 minutes, and it's free. 19th. A fall vegetable is also a soil crop. This took me a long while to see, and I like it better than anything else on the list. You don't have to choose between feeding your family and covering your ground. Put in kale, spinach.
If you want living roots and supper too, the next answer does both.
Turnip greens, mustard, or radishes, and you've got living roots in that soil right through fall, which is exactly what a cover crop is doing. Roots feed the microbes around them, keep the nutrient cycle turning, and the leaves on top shade the surface. The soil doesn't check whether you intend to eat the plant. So if you feel like you ought to plant a cover crop, but you'd rather have greens for the table, plant the greens. You're doing the soil work either way. Cover crop where you don't need food, food where you do. You can cover your ground with something you eat. I don't know why nobody says that out loud. 20th. On mountain ground, protect the slope before you improve the fertility. We finish here, because this is what separates a hillside garden from a flat one, and most gardening advice is written for flat. If your ground...
That may work on flat ground. On slopes, gravity gets the final vote.
Tilts, gravity is a partner in everything you do. Every rain is a negotiation. So don't leave bare strips running downhill. Water finds them and turns them into little rivers. Run your rows across the slope rather than up and down it. Iowa State's guidance on slopes says the same, and adds a point most people miss. Look at where water comes from before it ever reaches your garden. Driveways, roofs, downspouts. Send that water somewhere else and you've solved more than any amendment will. And keep something on the ground through winter. Cover crop, mulch, chopped residue. Something. Because on a hillside, the richest soil in the world isn't worth a nickel if a September rain carries it down to the creek. 20 things. Let's make them into something you can actually do. Because a list you don't act on is just reading. Here's how I'd run it as 7 days. Slide them around as you need to. Day 1. Walk and mark. 5 sticks, 5 trouble spots.
All that
standing water, runoff,
only when
crust,
tomorrow's
bare
work
ground,
becomes
the
obvious.
paths your feet made. Day 2, cut the weeds before they seed and pull the diseased material. Day 3, pull your soil sample and test compaction with a fork in 3 places. Day 4, fix moisture and open any crust. Water deep, check the depth with a trowel, and scratch the sealed spots open once there's moisture in them. Day 5, compost where it'll count, and rebuild the mulch over ground that's damp, not dry. Day 6, plant. Fall greens where you want food. Cover crop where you don't. Check your frost date before you buy seed. Day 7, fix the paths, protect the slope, and walk it once more looking for anything still bare. If you've already got leaves, old mulch, a compost pile, and seed on the shelf, that week costs close to nothing. Sweat and the price of a soil test. Now, I won't tell you 7 days will rebuild your soil. It won't. Soil moves at the speed of biology and weather, and that's measured in seasons, not weekends. But 7 days can change what happens to that soil for the next 7 months, whether it goes into winter, covered or naked, with living roots or none, whether the rain soaks in or runs off, whether you spend next April fighting weeds you allowed this August. That's not a small thing. That's most of it. I've put all 20 of these checks into a printed guide you can carry out to the garden with you. The checklist, a page for mapping your trouble spots, the crust versus compaction test, the cover crop selector by purpose, a blank line for your own frost date, the soil sampling instructions, the manure safety rule written out plain, and the 7-day reset day by day. It's free, and the link's below this video. Print it, mark it up, get it dirty. That's what it's for. One more thing before you go. Those old mountain farmers weren't better gardeners than you. Some were, some weren't. They contended with exhausted soil and eroded hillsides, and they knew it. That's in the record too, and I won't pretend otherwise. But they were working with almost nothing. No bag on the shelf, no jug with a promise on the label. What they had was manure, roots, leaves, rain, a hoe, and the habit of paying attention to what the ground was doing. Not every old way was better. Some of it was flat wrong, and I've told you where. But one piece of that thinking is worth carrying forward. Soil wasn't something you fed once and forgot. It was something you handed from one season to the next, and you tried to hand it over a little better than you got it. That's what late August really is. Not the end of a garden. It's the handoff. Go walk your ground.